Good morning, everybody. Welcome, welcome, welcome. So glad that you're here. Before we get started on day 2, I would love to hear if you can type in the chat or in the Q&A box. The chat should be available, but you know what? Zoom has been acting funny for me. So either way, if you have any questions about day 1, that we did not get to answer yesterday, please feel free to put that in the chat and I will make sure to answer that today as well. Okay. Awesome. Welcome. It looks like we've got Catherine here, Rebecca, Allison. So glad that you're here. Let's see here. Just my text reminders going off here. So let's chat in the comments, or again, if the chat button is not working, you can use the Q&A as well, but it looks like the chat is working. So awesome. I would love to hear, what was your biggest takeaway or your biggest aha moment from yesterday? And I will wait because I love interactive workshops and I really get the most out of this. And I feel like you guys get the most out of it too when we do have those interactions. So I would love to hear, what was your biggest, like, wow, I didn't realize that was contributing, or I didn't realize how many symptoms I was really having in that area. I would just love to hear. All the symptoms I'm having. Okay. Yeah, I'm hoping that your internet stays stable for you today, Allison. I'm sorry that happened. Were you able to watch the replay? Okay. Awesome. Well, we'll give people a minute or two to hop on. Reminder to put my health as a higher priority. I have nearly all of the symptoms. So I think that's a really good point of conversation, Catherine. So what are the things that keep you from putting your health as a higher priority, that keep you from putting that in place? Because I can guarantee you that you're not the only one who struggles with that. Money. Okay. And do you find that, Catherine, that you have no problem putting money towards your children or your spouse or a pet that you have or a house issue, but putting that towards yourself feels just kind of yucky? Because I think we got to dig in a little bit deeper, because I know for most of the women that I work with, and myself included, that we have no problem putting other people first, right? We have no problem, supporting our spouse. And so sometimes it means, instead of like, well, we're going to put all of our money towards this one health issue with our child, or this one health issue with our spouse, or braces, or whatever, we kind of spread it out more evenly, so that you actually can invest in yourself and put some of that energy towards your healing. Because guess what happens when we don't do that? Our symptoms end up getting worse and it ends up taking longer to heal, which usually ends up costing us more money, right? So it ends up biting us in the butt for sure, big time. Let's see here. And then it's a fear of things not working. So like trying things and them not working. Is that what you mean by that? Okay, and Rebecca says, for those of you that are just joining, welcome, Evie. Hopefully I said your name right. Let me know if I didn't. And okay, welcome, Evie. We are just chatting about biggest takeaways from yesterday. And I want to make sure that we are recording. I think so, but let me just double check here. Okay, we are. Okay, so Rebecca says, surprised that irritable bowel disease, Hashimoto's, and all the things on that list could be related to hormones and gut brain health. I've had nearly all of those. So absolutely. Yep. And this is why I absolutely love doing this workshop, because you have to start thinking about your hormones as like the fruit on the tree, right? And your tree is the whole health of your overall body. But we have these, primary organ systems that have to be working appropriately for the tree to be healthy. So the hormones are just the fruit, of one branch of that big tree. And all of those symptoms impact everything else. So I'm so glad that that connected for you. And hopefully it helps you to also see that when we address those root causes, it also heals other things, right? So it's not just going to heal your hormones, it's going to heal other issues that you had. So welcome, M. Johnson. I can't see the first name there, but welcome. We are just getting started and we're sharing biggest takeaways from yesterday. But I also think, so Catherine, yes, so many things that have failed in the past. So I totally get that. And that is a very, very common mindset trap, right? It's like a little bit of self-sabotage in there because we don't want to fail. And at the same time, if we don't risk failure, we'll never maybe get to where we need to go. And so it's really important to, instead of like, oh, I don't want to try anything because I've failed so many things in the past, to really understand why it failed. And so today we're actually going to be talking about why what you've tried hasn't worked. And I'm hoping that that brings a lot of clarity. To you. But how many of you actually experience fear when we talk about doing something to heal your hormones? Like there's a fear that you're going to try something and it won't work. There's a fear that you'll invest money and you won't get out of it what you put into it. There's a fear that like any kind of like background hesitation, resistance. How many of you have been are experiencing that when I start talking about it? Welcome, Anna. Okay. Yeah. And so that anxiety, that low level, like constant anxiety is definitely a gut health issue for sure. Gut brain connection there. Okay. So if nobody's experiencing fear, that's awesome. I like to check, because if we don't check in with our hesitations and fears, it doesn't matter what I lay out for you, how great of a plan I, provide for you, or if I give you all of the steps, that fear will absolutely keep you from moving forward. And so we have to go back to the very beginning when we talked about how this is really impacting you, right? How it's impacting your home life, and then we have to look at the goals that we have, right? So if our goal is like, gosh, I want a thriving marriage, I want more intimacy, I want to enjoy more sex, I want to not be snapping at my kids all the time because they don't feel good when I do that, and I don't feel good about myself, and I'm tired of feeling miserable. If we don't look at that as the motivator for addressing all of our symptoms, we are going to continually go back to that fear, and that's going to continue to stop us from moving forward. Does that make sense to everybody so far? Okay. Awesome. And like I said, any questions kind of lingering from yesterday, please feel free to put it in the comments, and I will make sure to, we should have some time for Q&A today. So, all right, so let's dig into why what you've tried hasn't worked. And because, yep, all that you are saying, I want all of those things. Yep. Totally. You're not alone. These are the things we were designed to have. We were made to have abundant health and abundant life. And when our hormones aren't functioning properly because we've got some root issues that are going on, sorry, it makes, actually that made me a little bit darker. Never mind. Okay, well, we will deal with that later. It makes everything more difficult, right? It makes life way less enjoyable, and that's just not fun. So let's talk about why what you've tried hasn't worked. And I want you to actually throw in the chat the things that you have tried so that I can address those more specifically. But in general, so this is, keep in mind that, my program developments, how I work with clients, even using the Dutch testing or stool testing, et cetera, in the work that we do, there was a 10-year research period on that. And so I've read through pretty much everything that you can possibly we read through to address these issues. And it's really important to understand that when you feel like you have failed something, it's more than likely the process or what was offered to you was not the right thing for you, or there's some elements to that that we're missing. So the very first thing that we see in all of the research and development is that it does not, if you have tried something and failed, it is not actually addressing the root causes, or they were trying to address the root causes, but they didn't actually understand your hormone patterns. So yesterday, actually in the Hormone Wellness Academy, we had our one of our monthly coaching calls. And one of the ladies was, she'd worked with a nutritionist, she'd worked with her practitioner, her naturopath, and she was like, they can't even agree on whether or not I have estrogen dominance because it was high in my blood and low in my urine. And I said, the reason why they're stuck is because they don't actually understand how to read hormone patterns. I don't need to have your labs in front of me to be able to see, based off of a hormonal pattern that you're experiencing, what some of the root causes are. And that just comes down to how much I've invested in my training and my education. So why what you've tried hasn't worked? You probably have not fully addressed the root causes. And one of the things that I see on a consistent basis, and this absolutely was the case for me when I first started addressing my hormone imbalances about 12 years ago, was that even though my naturopath really was trying to address the root causes, it was like every single month our target was different, right? The target was moving. There was no clear cut path to address all of those root issues. And so one month we'd be addressing mood swings. The next month we'd be addressing cramps. And then once the cramps would resolve, the mood swings would come back. And so then we were back to dealing with that thing instead of really thoroughly addressing the root causes so that I could actually move forward. And even if you're here and you're like, the only thing I've ever tried is birth control, it's okay. If the only thing you've ever tried is, moving your body or exercise or supplements, it's okay. Like I'm not expecting you to have exhausted all of your efforts, but I want to let you know why those things haven't worked. So on the topic of birth control, hormone replacement therapy, number one, you have to understand how these things work. Birth control was formulated by a pharmaceutical company to actually prevent pregnancy. And in order to prevent pregnancy, this is not a political conversation. We're talking about biology, and we are talking about how these chemicals interact in our body. So I'm strictly talking about facts here and how that actually suppresses our hormones. And what they have found in the long term, regardless of why somebody uses it, whether you initially started to use it because you did want to prevent pregnancy, which I did in the past because I didn't know how that was impacting my brain and my body, is that it actually shuts down the communication between your gut, your brain, and your ovaries. And that communication doesn't automatically get restored when you stop taking birth control. In fact, what they've found, and you can read this in the book Beyond the Pill, there's a couple other pieces of literature that talk about this as well. But one of the things that they mention in there is that these effects linger for sometimes 10 to 20 years after stopping hormone replacement therapy or birth control, because it's disrupting the gut brain ovary signaling, which is essential for healthy hormones. So if you've ever been on birth control and you're like, why are my periods so wacky after going off the pill or what have you, it's not you, it's just your body trying to recalibrate to that. But again, birth control does not address the root causes. What they're trying to do is suppress the symptoms, which means to push the symptoms further into the body. And I'm trying to think of a good analogy for this. We'll just use the rug analogy. So how many of you have a child or were the child that when your parent told you to go clean your room, you just shoved everything under your bed or in the closet or like under a rug, right? Instead of sweeping something into a dustpan, you sweep it under the rug, right? And then all of a sudden the rug has this nice big lump, or like stuff just starts falling out of the closet because there's no more room in there. That's what happens in our bodies when symptoms get suppressed for so long. They just go haywire. And so that is where so many of you are, where you're experiencing that dysregulation in your hormones that's showing up as mood swings, irritability, fatigue, painful periods, heavy periods, endometriosis, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So why those things haven't worked is because they're not addressing the root causes. The other reason why what you've tried has not worked, especially if we're talking about I'll talk about that in specifics here in just a second, but if they are not addressing the issues in a systematic way. So the body heals actually pretty systematically. And we know that, there are certain phases of detox that lead to other phases of detox, right? So like the liver then moves into the bowels, which then moves out of the body. Like there are these specific ways that our physiology works that if we can tune into them and understand how to do that, like in a step-by-step way, instead of just guessing, I need magnesium because I'm stressed, or I need, progesterone because X, Y, and Z, right? If we can learn to address those in a step-by-step way, and while kind of tuning into our body along that process, that's where we see those long-term results, where you're not constantly like every 3 months having a weird cycle and going to your OBGYN and asking for something to fix your symptoms. So if you've tried, like, for example, yoga is awesome for body movement, of course, stress reduction, healthy eating is good for everybody, but there is a difference between clean eating or healthy eating, that's like a kind of a standard diet that everybody needs, versus eating for your hormones, which is a very, very, very different focused process. Does that make sense so far? And even Rebecca, this is where a lot of women get stuck, is the elimination of foods. And so, which sadly, for those of us in our 30s and 40s, like most of us have done some sort of like restrictive dieting or elimination diet, and maybe that was to address food allergies, but elimination will only take you so far, right? What we really need to be focusing on, what I focus on, whether I'm working with somebody one-on-one or in one of my programs, is what to eat instead. So meaning instead of like, you need to get rid of all of these things, we're actually focusing on what food should you be eating to support your liver, and then paying attention to how your body responds to that, and then making appropriate adjustments. So we focus much more on the nourishing aspect instead of the elimination aspect. Very few things actually need to be eliminated from our diet to support our hormones. Does that make sense to everybody so far? Yeah. So Allison, restoring some of those hunger cues and your attention to your body and how your body is feeling and how your body responds to food is going to be a big part of that process for you. The other thing that we found in all of the research and development was inadequate support. Why women fail at healing their hormones, or why the system fails women at healing their hormones, is really inadequate support. And I know that when I say that, most of you are probably thinking like, I never even thought I needed support, like, because it's never been offered, right? Like, I remember when I first went into my doctor and I was like having panic attacks at the same time every morning because my cortisol was out of whack and my periods were awful and my mood was just absolutely in the toilet. And she would not look any further than just throwing medication at me. And, oh, it's postpartum, even though your baby's 9 months old. Like, it wasn't it was, yeah, I was malnourished because of postpartum, meaning I didn't have the right nourishment that my body needed. But I also did not have the support that I needed to make the lifestyle and, dietary changes that I needed to make to actually heal my hormones. And neither did I have the understanding of, what's normal detox, like what is unhealthy detox. If you start a supplement and you start to feel bad, is that a good thing or is that a bad thing? And so how many of you have found yourselves like, you start a supplement because you read a blog and you're like, oh, this is the thing that's going to help my thyroid or my adrenals or my hormones or my period cramps, and then you're on it for 1 to 2 months and you can't tell if it's working, so you stop taking it? How many of you have been there? Or with a medication as well? Or like, any kind of lifestyle thing, right? So the reason why that isn't working is because you don't actually have the support that you need to lead to those long-term sustainable results. We actually need somebody to have some oversight to give us feedback and say, you know what, that's a totally normal, healthy detox symptom. So let's push through it. If we don't see a change in like 3 days, which is what we would typically expect, then we can make some adjustments instead of just like throwing the baby out with the bathwater. Right? It's kind of like I have a child with special needs. She has PANDAS, which is an autoimmune condition that affects her neurological function and her executive function. I had to learn to be a mom to her because the mom that I got to be to her before she got PANDAS, I had to learn how to parent her completely differently, which meant that I had to get coaching for that. I had to have somebody show me like how to know if what I'm doing is working for her versus totally backfiring and blowing up in my face, right? Which sometimes you can't tell. So we all need support for the areas that we are not skilled in, right? There's nothing wrong with that, but we have to recognize if that's one of the things that's actually holding us back and keeping us from getting the results that we're wanting to see. So the other reason why what you've tried hasn't worked or why what you've tried has failed you is a heavy reliance on supplementation or medication that actually suppresses your symptoms. So I've actually seen this happening quite a bit, even in the functional medicine, like world of medicine, which is different than conventional medicine, where they're prescribing or doing labs and things like that. They're using the same mentality to treat symptoms. They're just using supplements instead. So a lot of times, and we actually talked about this yesterday on the Hormone Wellness Academy call, where somebody was like, I'm taking DIM, but I don't really know why I'm taking DIM. Like my doctor told me that my estrogen really wasn't that high, but I'm having all of these high estrogen symptoms. Should I still be taking it? So we dove into that and I explained, that DIM really only addresses one of the liver detox pathways, and we need to heal all three of them if we're going to have healthy, thriving hormones. And so you may need a supplement for a short period of time to fill in those nutritional gaps, right? Or to kind of gently nudge the body in the way that it needs to go. It should not, under any circumstances, I have never seen it be as successful as learning how to heal the root causes through nutrition and lifestyle changes. Meaning like knowing what to eat to support your liver, knowing what to eat to support healing the gut-brain connection. So how many of you, I'm just curious because again, every class is so different who shows up. How many of you you're kind of like eyeing your medicine cabinet and all of the hundreds of dollars that you've spent on supplements trying to sort out your symptoms? Do we have anybody here that was me? So I can own it. If none of you have done that, that's awesome. You've saved yourself a buttload of money. Half my kitchen. Okay. Yep. So again, it's that not knowing what to be focusing on, right? And when to use a supplement versus when to not use a supplement. And we need to be working with somebody that can help us identify those things. So does this clarify for you why what you've tried hasn't worked? The other thing too, I just wanted to go back to, I'm just looking through the yoga, healthy eating and supplements. So things like yoga, deep breathing, those are all really good things. But if you are noticing that, I will just tell you, it's not enough to heal the gut-brain connection. It's not enough. And I can tell you this from working with hundreds of women over the last 3 years, that it's not enough. And so there are other things that we have to do to target healing that gut-brain connection, which we're going to talk about tomorrow. So, okay, I'm glad this made sense. Okay, so let's talk about why what your doctor doesn't know could be keeping you stuck. And so this was a hard lesson for me to learn because, again, my training is in conventional medicine. I have lots of really good relationships with doctors that I have worked with over the years, and I love working with physicians. I love collaborating with them. However, we also need to understand that if we feel like we're beating our head against a wall, every time we go to our OBGYN because we're trying to get answers and we just don't have them, we need to understand why that's happening. Otherwise, it's like, what is that? I forget the saying. I'm not even going to try to remember it because I can't think of it right now. But otherwise, we just keep doing the same thing, expecting different results, right? And we need to get out of that spin cycle and actually know what we need to be looking for. So I just wanted to kind of briefly talk about why you may not be getting the answers that you're hoping for with your provider. So OBGYNs, general practitioners, medical doctors, PAs, even nurse practitioners don't actually have advanced training in hormones. What we learn in medical school, and even like in the advanced nurse practitioner programs and PA programs and MD programs, we learn how to prescribe medication to address pathophysiology, which is a pathology, dysfunctional physiology in your body. So what that means is if somebody comes in for painful periods, they're going to screen for endo maybe like 5 years into the process, not initially like they should. And they also, their MO is, well, we just got to give a pill for that, right? They don't have any advanced training in nutrition or lifestyle adjustments that can actually change your epigenetics and change your physiology. So if we understand that their approach is maybe not aligned with where we want to go, then we can stop going that route expecting for them to fix it, right? They just simply don't have the training. And part of the reason for that, just to kind of understand the medical system a little bit, every single licensed provider, myself included, we have to do somewhere between 30 and 60 hours a year of continuing education. Now, most providers that work in a hospital system or a medical system of some kind, that's paid for by their facility. And so they don't actually get to choose what education they get. And so maybe, the last 2 years, it's been all about like the spike protein and COVID and managing caregiver burnout and all of that stuff. They don't get to choose that. And also they don't have to pay for it. And most practitioners are so burnt out that they don't want to spend their own money on getting advanced training in hormones. So anybody that's making any impact in the realm of hormones, they're doing it because they've paid for it themselves, and myself included, meaning I have paid to find the research and do the advanced education and get the certifications and really understand what's happening in the body because I was tired of seeing women suffer, myself included. Okay. So just understand it's not because they're trying to harm you. It's not because they don't care about your outcomes. They do. They just don't have better information. So I just wanted to explain that really quickly. Functional medicine, and I know I briefly touched on this in the last slide, still focuses mainly on supplementation to suppress or mitigate symptoms instead of healing the root causes through those sustainable, targeted nutrition and lifestyle adjustments that actually will reverse and heal the body. The third reason why women get really, really, really stuck, and I will just say, I've seen this, I can't even count the number of times that I've seen this. I know for a fact it was my situation too, but heavy reliance on outdated lab testing that completely misses the root problems. And it's actually why I don't rely on them in my practice. Serum blood testing. How many of you have had blood testing either for like thyroid issues or adrenal issues or like reproductive hormones? Okay. And how many of you have ever had something come back outside of a normal range? Okay. So typically, the normal range, I just want to explain this to you. Normal does not equal functional. So what is normal, let's see, you're never for blood, finally for saliva, for adrenals. Okay. So, so with blood testing, what we see is that it literally is just taking a tiny little snapshot of what's happening in your blood at that moment in time. And so when we're looking at normal ranges, what that means is out of 1 to 2,000 women that were, 1,000 or 2,000 women, I can't remember the exact number, tested, everybody fell within these numbers. But there is no indicator within those numbers as to how they are actually functioning. So if, let's say, they say the normal range for thyroid, like TSH, is somewhere, now this is endocrinology. This is not functional medicine, but endocrinology says somewhere between like 1.5 and 6.9. I am telling you that if you had a TSH of 6.9, you would be having panic attacks. You would be having severe adrenal dysfunction. There would be a lot of other symptoms. So even though it's within normal, it absolutely is not functional. And so, but what they do is they look at those normal numbers and they say, oh, you're totally fine. There's nothing wrong with you. There's nothing for us to fix. And the reason is they're not actually doing testing that accurately shows us where some of the root cause issues are. Does this make sense to everybody? So unless you have somebody like, I will look at blood lab testing and even some saliva testing if I have it in conjunction with their symptom profile. And I will be able to tell based off of that if there's something else that we're missing or we need to work on. And then again, why what your doctor isn't telling you could be keeping you stuck is they don't really have a step-by-step, a systematic process to get you from A to Z and dealing with your root causes in a non-overwhelming way. Because I know that for most of us, we couldn't handle a 21-page protocol. You know what I mean? Like if I remember when I first went to my naturopath, I had so many things wrong with me. I had an undiagnosed brain injury. I had adrenal like burnout. I had liver dysfunction. I had all of this stuff that was wrong. And he printed me out a 21-page report of all of the things that I had to change. My diet had to be completely overhauled. Excuse me. Excuse me. And when you're not feeling good, it's really, really hard to take those action steps. And so we need to have like a step-by-step process, right? To be like, okay, I'm going to take this step today, and then I'm going to see how my body feels, and I'm going to get some feedback, and then I'm going to move forward. So how many of you feel like, gosh, if I just had a step-by-step something to follow, if I knew exactly what I was doing, if I knew that I had somebody in my corner to kind of help me navigate this, I would be feeling so much better. Like, that would help you to overcome some pretty significant roadblocks. Okay. All right. So I want to share with you, another testimony. This one is also one of my favorites. So I didn't do the full testimony. That is all in the big free community group. But Tana, she actually came to me with chronic fatigue syndrome and fibromyalgia, in addition to like her hormones were just out of control. So really bad mood swings, really bad anxiety, insomnia. But her biggest issue was that fatigue, and it would just get exponentially worse before her cycle. And so as we walked through, the foundations of healing her hormones, she's going to share kind of a little bit about her transformation, but she no longer has that diagnosis of chronic fatigue or fibromyalgia simply from healing those root causes, even though that wasn't her goal. Her goal was not to heal those issues. Her goal was to heal her hormones. But again, when we address the root causes, everything else starts to heal as well. So let's take a listen.
I was older having my third son. And so first I thought that's just what it is. I mean, I was 40 when I had him. So I just thought this is how it is when you're 40 and have a kid. But it just didn't seem right. But what was different is like, I remember when I had my first two, I could get on the ground and play with them. I could do all those things. And with this little guy, I'm just like, I just can't. I'm just so tired. And so now I can play with them and I want to play with them. And I feel like because of that, like we have a great bond, but I feel like it's even better. And our relationship is even better. And even with my older boys, like I'm more patient with them. And I think that's a big thing that I've noticed. I mean, I still, when things get crazy, I still snap at them and stuff like that, but I have control over things. And, I can be in the moment more, I think is the big thing for me, and enjoy my family and I've said this to my husband before. I'm like, this is what I always imagined being a mom was going to be like, and so that joy and that excitement and enjoying your kids, even when they frustrate you, I didn't have that with my second son until much later. And now with all three of them, I can not only, like before I was enjoying it but I was so tired I couldn't like be a part of it. I don't know if that makes sense, but so yeah, so I think that's the big daily change for me, is that like I'm a part of my family again. I can enjoy them and I can participate, and it's a really busy season right now for us, and I can do it. So that's huge for me.
So how many of you, first of all, resonate with her story and that fatigue and just wanting to be able to enjoy your family and not feel like you're constantly chasing one symptom after another, right? And it was amazing to watch her transformation, because it was, at the very beginning, she was extremely tired. So literally all we could do was one action step a week. And that is all that we have our clients do, one action step a week, because number one, we want to see how the body adjusts to that, how the body responds to it before we add anything else. Otherwise, how many of you know, like, it becomes very, very difficult to tell what's working when we have too many things in the pot at once. So for her, she was having to nap every day. She was not sleeping well. She was waking up exhausted, waking up multiple times a night to, at the end of that process, she, no mood swings, having energy, being able to go on walks with her kids, playing with her youngest child, which was a huge dream of hers. So, and she's just like you guys. She is no different than the rest of us who, were hot mess express hormones when we first got started. So I want to leave you guys today on that note of encouragement. But I also want to leave a couple minutes for questions. And then tomorrow I'm going to actually be walking you through how we do this and what that looks like. So are there any questions that you guys have for me today that you'd like for me to answer before we hop off? Okay. I do work with men on a one-on-one basis. So Rebecca, I'd be happy to send you some information on that if that would be helpful. Depending on their symptoms, yes. Yeah, absolutely. Okay. All right. Yep, I can do that, Catherine. No problem. Okay, ladies, if you think of any questions after we hop off today, make sure to bring them tomorrow. The link will be exactly the same, but I'm excited to dive in with you guys tomorrow on how we actually heal the symptoms and where you can get started. So we will chat more tomorrow, but I hope you guys have a great rest of your day.